Good afternoon, one and all. Welcome to the second session of day 4 of this faculty development program on blockchain technology. Today we have Mr. Raghavendra Deshmukh. I thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation and getting associated with this FTP. Giving an introduction to Mr. Raghavendra Deshmukh. He's a software product development leader with 23 plus years of experience in building software products in the areas of BI, EPM, IoT, supply chain logistics, and blockchain. He currently leads the product development efforts in Walmart Global Tech India for the blockchain platform and applications in the supply chain space. He has been a part of blockchain innovations in the areas of food supply chain and international cross-border trade in his previous experience at SAP Labs. He's an avid blockchain enthusiast and has been involved with the blockchain ecosystem in India for the past 4 years. So thank you, sir, for getting associated with this FTP. I welcome you, sir. Over to you now. Over to you, sir. I stop sharing the screen.
Okay, I will.
Yes.
I still cannot share my screen.
Yes.
Now I can,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, I will. I'm a little struggling with this. How do I turn my video off? Now I switched it on. Okay, yeah. So thank you very much to Dr. Bhargavi and Dr. Asha from BIT for having given me this opportunity to be part of the FDP program and spend some time talking with all of you on the topic of blockchain in supply chain. So I'm very happy to be associated with such academic institutions. I've always had a mix of academia and industry that I've worked with. And today I'm very happy to be part of this particular session. And I'm sure this has been a very enriching week for all of you. I sat through some parts of the previous lecture by Maniklal Das. I've met him in Dhirubhai Ambani Institute a couple of years ago and had conversations with him in the past. So let's get started. And a word of disclaimer for all of us here. This is a material that I have created and collated specifically for this session based on my experiences, my readings, and what I learn from the industry and various other people within the ecosystem. This in no way is a representation of the vision or the product offering that my current employer, Walmart Labs or Walmart Global Tech, is going to have, right? So this is just my experience that I'm sharing here. Having said that, a little bit about myself. Who am I? I've been in the industry for in excess of 23 years. Started off with a very interesting subject of market research, and then moved into clinical trials, etc. Later, I worked on IoT and BI and EPM solutions. Then came IoT, the cloud, and later I spent several years on supply chain logistics, and then in the last 3.5, 4 years on the world of blockchain, where I'm trying to explore that. On a personal front, I am a core Bengaluru Hudga. I've been born and brought up here, educated here, and been living here ever since. From a personal interest perspective, music interests me, and I'm a cricket enthusiast. I can talk for hours together on cricket and music to anyone in this world. Having said that, so here we are looking at something called as digital transformation. When we look at digital transformation, there are a lot of things that I personally think are happening in the world of digital transformation. one of the biggest things that is happening is that the business landscape is changing. So when we look at the business landscape, it used to always be in the several years ago, big corporations, big companies doing a lot of stuff and dominating the market, right? But then once the markets have opened up, small and medium businesses are coming up and they're breaking the barriers, which was just fixed with the regular big companies, right? And they're uh, kind of challenging the traditional ways of doing business and kind of optimizing the offering that is available, right? Case in point being agri-tech. So agriculture was not very much adopting to the latest and greatest technologies, but in the last 5 to 7 years, we see that there is a lot of activity happening in the agricultural tech. Fintech has been enhanced and improved by leaps and bounds. Supply chain industries have kind of lapped up the technology innovations, etc. Food technology has been revolutionized. The way we travel has been revolutionized, etc. Right? So digital transformation is surely happening in the changing business landscape, and that is contributing to it. COVID-19 definitely is one of the biggest motivators for digital transformation in the last 8, 10 months, because we've seen the people had to innovate and innovate very quickly. People have come up with different business models where they now offer contactless services, paperless trade, e-payments have become very prevalent now. Of course, there has been a push from the last few years on e-payments, etc., but that has kind of really gotten to the grassroots level and getting things happen there, right? This has been a big driving factor in the digital transformation because it's no longer that uh, there's only a very localized way of doing business for anybody at this moment, right? For example, you can still order a particular product from Alibaba and you can get it shipped from anywhere, right? And case in point being, yesterday a day before yesterday, I was participating in a Hyperledger event, and they sent all of us an email saying that, hey, look, if you want to get a free T-shirt for this event, um, you can subscribe to this. And the T-shirt is actually getting shipped from the US, right? And it just costs $15 to get that done, right? I mean, so it's kind of globalization is driving a lot of digital transformation within the whole world now. Customers. Customers are centric to the whole digital transformation journey that companies are undertaking. Customers demand a very high level of satisfaction for the goods and products and services that they buy. And we'll see that customers are capable or are willing to kind of pay a premium for better services that they can get, right? So customer is really at the central focal point of the digital transformation. Technology has improved by leaps and bounds in the last years. The proliferation and the commoditization of technologies like artificial intelligence, computer vision, RPA, mobile technology, augmented reality, blockchain, etc., is getting really interesting. I mean, if you look at even a 10,000 rupee mobile phone, you will have some ways of doing some kind of augmented reality in it. There will always be some enhancement to the photo that you can take. I mean, it's that easy right now, right? So we'll see why we are talking about digital transformation while when we go into the next set of slides, right? So what do I have on the agenda today? So I'll talk about the blockchain value drivers. I'm sure across various sessions in this week, you all have been enriched with the information about what blockchain can do and how blockchain can give you values. I'll touch upon that. I'll touch upon the kind of behaviors and the patterns that we see in what happens with supply chains, right? From my vantage point, I have worked on and been exposed to a lot of use cases, so I'll talk about a few of them and the approaches that we took to solve those use cases and what were the benefits to the customers that we saw in that. and what are the key takeaways? And then I'll be happy to answer the questions here. So so let's go ahead. Okay. So what are the blockchain value drivers that we are seeing here, right? So blockchain has been established to be a multi-party collaboration on a single version of truth, right? So be wherever you are, if you are part of a blockchain, you know that there is a single version of truth that is prevailing at that point in time on that particular context, be it a particular thing or a person or a business, etc. Uh, there is that one version of truth that is already available, right? So this kind of powers something called as process optimization that can really drive the business. Because when we look at business, there are multiple parties collaborating with each other, and process optimization is in itself going to be a very helpful way forward, right? The next thing that we'll see is what optimization drives is because of peer-to-peer networks without intermediaries being in the middle, there is a lot of time and cost reduction that we see. So in that sense, blockchain drives the creation of value by reducing cost, right? Blockchain also has been called as the Internet of Value, right? So we look at the immutable history that blockchain provides. So which means that the data set that we have is always auditable, and auditability can actually give us a lot of visibility to what happened in the past, and it can drive a lot of our business decisions if we have visibility to a lot of information, right? And when we have all of this, blockchain can actually drive a lot of ways in which we can reduce risks on our business, right? Um, so the idea is to reduce risks. Of course, if the whole blockchain in itself is corrupt, and like in the case of dark web, etc., right? The whole network will be fraudulent. You'll not be able to kind of derive any value out of it, right? So it'll always be a risky network. But so we're not saying that blockchain will eliminate risk or eliminate fraud, but it will reduce in a visible network where there are collaborations happening, right? So given the fact that we've established the blockchain value drivers, let's look at some of the supply chain characteristics, right? So what is supply chain? So supply chain is essentially the coming together of customers with their requirements and businesses trying to fulfill those requirements by of those customers, right? And that's what is the whole simplistic way of looking at a supply chain. But in order for this supply chain to be really functional, we see that there are several parties that are collaborating with each other. So we have sellers or suppliers, we have buyers, we have our customers, so we have the warehouses, the transporting uh, companies, the logistics companies. If it's cross-border trade, it is customs, the port authorities, the retailers, etc., etc., right? Now, when too many people come into the picture, what happens is that the processes can get a little bit bigger. When the processes get bigger, it gets complex, right? So, case in point being, when we look at the logistics itself, there are several parties that are collaborating with each other in trying to kind of deliver something from one place to another, right? I mean, we all must have been buying stuff from Flipkart or Amazon, and then we see the kind of buzz that happens there, right? And the processes that are being driven behind it, right? So there are a lot of complex processes that are being practiced and used there, which also means that there are different people with different processes or different companies with different processes. They have different systems, right? The systems could range from just a book or a ledger or a paper based thing to faxes to phone calls to then IT systems, which are using several high top grade ERP systems, etc., right? Or it could be EDI messages and stuff like that, right? So there are different systems which are trying to collaborate with each other on one version of the truth. So for example, if there is a purchase order, that's the version of truth that you're trying to collaborate on, right? Supply chain processes are also still using a lot of paper-based originals because most of these processes were established several decades ago when there was not a lot of technology or not any technology that existed at that point in time. So we'll look at some of those things, and there are a lot of paper-based originals that are existing, which means that uh, you will not have the proper visibility. So in order to get the right visibility, you need to kind of really struggle a little bit to say that where is what at this point in time, right? Which also means that since the process is a little bit kind of what do you call it, as crazy or complex, the supply chain industry invests a lot of time or spends a lot of time in dispute handling, right? So there are a lot of those disputes that companies are trying to kind of resolve with each other, that I agreed on X amount and you billed me for Y amount. This is not within our agreeable threshold rates. And so the reconciliation can take a long time, which means that payments get delayed and businesses suffer, right? Let's look at this particular thing here, and I have borrowed it from the article that I've quoted below here. So just read this for a moment. Maersk is a container company or a logistics company, and what it says is that something was shipped from Kenya to Netherlands, and it took 34 days. It had around 30 different companies being involved, 100 different people, 200 different interactions, and about 10 days were spent in waiting for some documents to be processed, right? Do you see a problem in this, right? I mean, do we see problems of what we talked about, right? I mean, let's look at the number of days to fulfill a trade, right? That's pretty high, right? Number of days where there was little or no information about what was happening. We're just waiting for information to come from someone. We're chasing around that information. Look at the number of parties that are involved, right? Um, and look at the number of documents that this will generate, right? It's going to be humongous, right? Someone said in one of the discussions some years back that I was in that a, a kind of a shipping container going from one continent to another will generate, if the number of documents are piled one on top of each other, it will be several centimeters, right? So that will be the thickness of the number of documents that you will require, and all of them are mandatory and regulatory to have at some point of time during the trade, right? And we'll look at that uh, in some point in time, right? And what does all of this do? There is a very high potential of information loss or the the loss of visibility of information, right? So that is a big uh, problem here, right? So let's look at this complex equation here, right? So we have the seller or the exporter, we have the importer or the buyer. So they agree on a sales agreement. Once that is done, the importer, so I'm looking at a cross-border trade or a trade finance use case, right? So both are interchangeably used at some point in time, but we'll see some of the subtle differences in a while, right? So there is a request for a letter of credit by submitting some documents to his bank, the importer's bank. The importer's bank will verify those, create the letter of credit, and send it to the exporter's bank. The exporter bank will verify that. It will tell the exporter that, hey, look, I have received the letter of credit and you will be paid. Don't worry about the financial strength of the importer. So why don't you go ahead and start the next process? So once that happens, the production might be done or it will be available in stock. Based on that, there will be a trade export permission that will be taken from the export authority. So we already had 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 people getting involved. It will then either directly ship the cargo from their warehouse to the port, or it could use an agent, etc. So we can introduce one more stakeholder in this whole equation. And while that happens, we'll also seek insurance for any damages against transportation, etc. And there'll be a three-party agreement that will be done. So it goes to the port of export, and there will be a customs inspection. And before that, there will be a bill of lading, a very, very sacrosanct document that will get created, and it will be given to the exporter, and a copy of that will be sent to the exporter's bank as well. The export permission will be done. So every country has different export permissions and documentation that is required. So already we have established that there are so many parties involved, and then there are many documents that are involved, right? And then the cargo gets shipped. And while the cargo gets shipped, there is the letter of credit, there is a bill of lading that is kind of getting sent from the exporter's bank to the importer's bank, right? So assume that the cargo has come here. Before anyone can come and claim it, they have to do the customs clearance here. And once that happens, the import bank gives the importer the bill of lading. He has to bring the original bill of lading to the port, get that custody of the cargo, and take it, right? So this is a very simplistic view of the thing. This is an image that I derived from Capgemini, and I'm going to introduce you to a slightly different kind of a thing that we see. And this is an image that I get from SAP. And this is exactly what I had worked on some years ago. So we also introduce people like freight forwarders, authorities, etc. So you see this slide is very busy, and it was not created out of any fictional thing, but this was actually the way in which it works, right? So when we look at this picture, we see that there is a lot of people involved. There's a lot of process going around, right? So now let's look at what is bill of lading, right? And this is a sample of the bill of lading. What it basically says is that it's a legally binding document which is issued by the carrier. The carrier is essentially the ocean liner or the truck operator who will be carrying the goods, right? And it will be given to the shipper. It tells what is being shipped, right? So you say what is the kind of item that is being shipped, who is the recipient, um, how is it packed? Is it packed in pallets? Is it packed in containers, etc.? What is its value, and who is the carrier, right? So that's the whole thing that is there. It always is created in 3 copies, right? It's given to the shipper, the bank, and the consignee. And it's a legal contract between the carrier and the shipper, right? It is because you cannot actually always have visibility to the goods. It's like a digital twin or a paper twin of that particular goods that are being carried out. And there are different types of bill of lading called negotiable bill of lading, which means that while the cargo is in transit, you can actually sell the cargo to someone else and it can change hands, right? So this is just one document. There are several of them. So what are the problems in the traditional bill of lading that we see, right? Currently, the way it is handled is manually, which means that someone at the carrier side, the ocean liner or the truck operator creates a bill of lading and hands over the originals to these parties, right? And once those are handed over, I'm sorry, someone is disturbing me with the call. Yeah. Uh, so once these are handed over, it still means that someone has to actually verify it and manually ship it across. We saw the process there, right? Many times I have seen, and we've seen from our discussions with our customers. So a couple of years back, I was in a pre-sales conversation, and a big exporter in Indonesia happened to tell us that he ships paper pulp to his customers in Malaysia and Singapore and various other countries. So what he notices is that the the cargo would have reached the port of destination, but the bill of lading is somewhere in transit, or no one has access to the bill of lading at the time that it is needed, right? Which also means that there is some process inefficiency that is happening, right? People have tried to solve this by using pin-based systems. They've also had problems in the past. There was a particular ocean liner which faced a lot of litigation because of the pin-based system. Someone was really able to create a duplicate of that and hack the pin and still take away the cargo which was meant for someone else, right? So that was a problem that has been seen in the traditional paper-based bill of lading. The accuracy of information sometimes might be tampered with because of it being a paper-based original, and different people now have same or similar copies of it, which means it kind of starts affecting the version of truth. So what was the value of the cargo? Was it 10 pallets or was it 15 pallets? So these could be some of the things that are kind of debatable there. And then the overall cost. So the document creation cost, the couriering cost, managing the whole thing, follow-ups, tracking, etc. Right? So that takes a lot of efforts and costs a lot of money for all the stakeholders here, right? So if we see a multi-party use case, there are several people. We looked at all these different parties in the network, and these are some of the documents. They're not all the documents, but there are some of the documents like letter of credit, bank guarantees, purchase orders, invoices, bill of lading, customs clearance, proof of delivery, uh, various other things, right? So there are several things in the thing here. So, so we talked about this paper-based originals, uh, disparate systems, lack of visibility, one version of truth missing, and manual handling, right? So these are some of the states that we see with the traditional cross-border trade that is happening. So if we were to say, how do we approach a solution for this using blockchain, right? And this is something that I would like to spend some minutes on, because we have really tried to get to the details of this and see how we can solve this, right? The idea was to bring all participants in one network, right? Now, if we say all participants, there could be several participants that are there. Do all of them want to be part of the network, right? And why would they be want to part of this network, right? So we need a way in which, even if they are physically or logically not part of a network where they don't own a blockchain node within the network, they have a way of sending data into the network, right? So that was one of the things that we tried to achieve. So we said that the seller, the buyer, the ocean liner, the customs, the port authorities, and perhaps the banks will all come and participate in a network. And this is not an open network. This is not a public network. The idea with which we went here was to create a permissioned enterprise grade network. So that was the first thing that we established. The next thing is, this industry, we said, and we recognize that, is always using a lot of paper-based originals. But how do we really ensure that the paper-based originals can still be there for regulatory purpose, but then we can kind of create a digital twin of the paper-based original? So which meant that we had to kind of digitize a lot of these documents, right? So a bill of lading, an invoice, um, not just a PDF scan, but really extract a lot of information out of this and create an object or a bunch of objects which can then be stitched together and shown or hidden from different parties that require those access. The third thing we did is create a very seamless way of digitally signing these documents. So which means that when participants onboard themselves onto the network, they have their authorized people on the network who will have a very simple Android or an iOS phone with an app on it where they can get the request for a particular document to be digitally verified and signed. So there is a digital identity of even the participants and the people who are, or the, or their parties who are working in their companies to digitally sign these things. So the documents themselves will not be sitting on the blockchain because blockchain is not meant for heavy data storage, but the documents themselves would be sitting in a secure document store, and hashes of these documents along with certain metadata will be present as digital twins in the blockchain. And when the digital signature is applied, the update happens the into the document in the document system, as well as there is a record of authorization in the blockchain, right? And once this happens, this digitized copy establishes a single version of immutable truth within the system. And this can then mean that we can actually kind of give a very seamless way of doing track and trace for that particular piece of cargo, right? So this particular container has now been digitized. It is identified with a bill of lading. The bill of lading is in itself identified with a purchase order, and we know whom is it being sent to. And based on certain non-blockchain systems like IoT or EDI messages, etc., there is track and trace that is possible, right? And one of the big things that we noticed when we discussed with our customers is that customers already have different systems. They don't really want uh, a net new system to be created on blockchain, right? Blockchain has to work under the hood. So the idea was to augment existing systems. Say, for example, the process flows that used to come from an order management system or a transportation system or a track and trace system or a yard management system or a customs approval system, right? So we could kind of augment existing systems by connecting them with blockchain, right? So that's how we did that. And we wrote a lot of smart contracts to ensure the visibility and restrictions can be controlled there, right? So, like I said, use permission blockchain. We prefer to use Hyperledger Fabric, but then there is also a way we can use R3 Corda. So both can complement each other. But we went with Hyperledger Fabric because it was a corporate decision that we made, and we were getting a lot of good support from the Hyperledger Foundation. We built a consortium of relevant parties, and it was really possible for us to spin up a network in about a few minutes and establish that information and create a permission network, and then take perhaps a day or two to onboard all these members onto each of those nodes and get them into the network. The data model, it was very critical for us to understand what was the key business data that has to go into the blockchain. Now, very critical for us to understand that not all data can go into the blockchain because blockchain is immutable and it's counterintuitive to rules and regulations like GDPR, right? So we need to ensure that we kind of honor that. So only key business data, transactional data can go into the blockchain or would go into the blockchain. Documents would be stored on a document store. It could be any secure document store that you could have. Um, so there are various other mechanisms that are open technologies that you can use. But we used a very proprietary document store within our company at that point in time, right? And we used to hash and keep the document hashes on the blockchain. And still the business sensitive data would reside on the transaction system. So a combination of these three would establish the uniqueness, the track and trace, and the digital twin of that particular data, right? We wrote a lot of smart contracts to kind of control the flow of documents, the availability or non-availability of the documents, to control the permissions of each of these members. So, for example, while the letter of credit transaction is happening, we don't need the carrier to be even part of the network. So we can bring him into the trade only later, right? So when that is happening, we don't need the banks to be part of the system. So those visibility and the permissions that we needed to have. So that was controlled using smart contracts or chain code written in Hyperledger Fabric. So of course, we had to offer a lot of business services. We had to onboard, we had to create networks, we had to create data exchange APIs between the legacy systems to the blockchain, right? So that's the way we did it. And the one big thing that we had to do was to offer interoperability. So we had a customer in China who wouldn't want to be on the blockchain network that we had created. They wanted to bring their own node and operate with us. So they didn't want to take our application that we had built. They just wanted to participate at a blockchain level. So the interoperability becomes a very important aspect here, and we had to provide for that. Um, so, and amongst all these things, when we look at permission blockchain participating along with legacy systems, there is also this whole consideration that we had to do for enterprise grade transactions per second in terms of the performance or the security, the data volumes that we needed to consider. And that's where the business model or the data model becomes very critical, right? So this is something that we did, and this was something that did not get realized overnight. It took several months for us to do this and several iterations with customers. Um, so like I showed you this particular example here. So we were able to bring a subset of these participants into the network and work on it. And when we did that, we were able to kind of successfully test out the fact that uh, customers could actually execute their trade by connecting their transactional systems through blockchain and give more visibility to participants like customs. So this was a proof of concept that we ran with Intel being the seller, Flextronics being the buyer, UPS being the carrier, and the border control or the US Customs being the customs authorities, right? And this was an experiment that we did in 2018 and 2019, and this passed really well. And so this kind of proved that the efficacy of blockchain was really there, right? What are the different other use cases that can be created? It's not just that people are creating one mega huge use case, but people are creating or using blockchain to create several smaller use cases. So we talked about the letter of credit document. That in itself is one of the trade finance, the marquee use cases for trade finance that is happening with the involvement of banks. So in the picture I showed, we showed the involvement of only two banks, but there are times when in the letter of credit use case, there are up to four banks that are involved, right? So that is a very critical use case. And from a technology point of view, R3 Corda seems to be the most preferred technology, or even Ethereum is a preferred technology there. There's another type of very specific customs import export process called ATA Carne. This is something where you don't need to pay customs import and customs export duty to non-perishable products. So it could be machinery, etc., that could be temporarily brought into a country and imported into a country and exported back. There are a lot of countries, about 88 countries in the world participate in this particular uh, the whole thing called ATA Carne, and that is being looked at. There is also something called as verified gross mass, which is a very specific piece of information that the suppliers and carriers have to provide for the ocean liners to be able to verify this and central authorities to look at it and to kind of have non-disputable ways of conducting business. Verified gross mass is another use case that is being done, very niche use case that is being done by a company called Kuehne Nagel, who are a type of it's a German company which does logistics. So they have done a blockchain use case with their technology partners on verified gross mass. There's a company in Netherlands and Belgium called T Mining, and they specialize in port operations. So secure container release. I talked to you about the pin-based system. So these guys are working very clearly with a lot of ocean liners and ports to do secure container release. And of course, there are trade finance systems that are working very specifically to do dispute management, so or to avoid disputes. So these are the some companies that I have looked at and read papers and participated in POCs with. I'm not mentioning the SAP use case because it's still not a real released use case at the moment, but that's another company that is also involved in the use cases here. But IBM TradeLens is well and truly the leading player in this. T Mining is one company. VTrade is very specific. It's a small company, but they do a lot of cool stuff. DLT Ledgers are again a Singapore-based startup which do some really good work. They are all part of the Hyperledger Foundation. CargoX is another one that is using that is being used in this whole cross-border trade and trade finance kind of use cases. Technologies that are really prevalent is Hyperledger Fabric, Ethereum, or some of them use Quorum. Quorum is the enterprise avatar for Ethereum, and R3 Corda, right? So these are the things. I'll switch over to another use case that I'm pretty fond of and currently working on in the past couple of years. It's the food supply chain and the drug supply chain for safety and the kind of transportation that happens here, right? So what we see from a food and medicine supply chain is that there is a lot of increased demand uh, for proven and reliable quality of food, right? It's no longer the case. Sorry, it's no longer the case that we just get food from anywhere. It's supposed to be reliable from where you're getting it. It's supposed to be proven that this food that you're getting is actually the right one that you actually asked for, right? There are The food supply chain has been severely hit by the COVID-19. Um, so especially in the meat industry, the poultry industry, there was a lot of chaos earlier part of the year, and they suffered a lot of doubts and losses that happened because of the fact that COVID-19 was induced by animal-human interaction, right? Year over year, we also see that food contamination increases, which also means that there are food-induced uh, diseases that have an outbreak in several countries, and several countries are taking very clear actions around this. And when it comes to visibility on the food provenance, it seems to be pretty low right now because one aspect of any supply chain, and I'll cover that in some minutes, is that no one would like to tell who their supplier is or who their suppliers are, right? Because if you know who my suppliers are, you may actually go and cannibalize the market, right? So it's always that I know whom I'm receiving the goods from and whom am I selling the goods to, right? But maybe I don't really know who is upstream or who is going to use this downstream, right? That kind of visibility is not yet very clearly visible, which means that it also leads to a lot of frauds uh, where you can kind of fake the certifications and pass off something that is not sustainable or organic uh, organic, or in the drug supply chain you can use the same batch number or lot number and reintroduce the spurious drugs into the supply chain, right? So these are some of the things that are there, and of course the regulatory bodies like FDA or the US DSCSA. DSCSA is nothing but Drug Supply Chain Securities Act, which is prevalent now, and by 2023, they expect more regulations to come in, right? So these are some of the things that are driving the food and the drug supply chain and safety, right? Some kind of data that I would like to show you here. This is not something that I created. I researched around this. In 2019, there was 15 billion loss in India for foodborne diseases, which means that if people really knew that some food was contaminated or this is not the right kind of food, maybe we could have kind of reduced this. I mean, we cannot clearly say we'll avoid everything with blockchain, but or with technology, but uh, that's that's something that is driving the whole need for uh, food traceability, right? So how do we trace food, right? And which means that if we kind of create a word cloud, what kind of really stands out is the safety, the risk, the monitoring, etc. Uh, that are really required for the food supply chain in terms of the safety or the traceability of it, right? So let's look at some of these things here, right? I'm sorry for the visual here. It's kind of moved a little down. So why do we need a digitized system for transparent food supply chain, right? So foodborne illnesses, cost of foodborne illness in the US alone ranges to this humongous number, right? We talked about that some number for India, but this is humongous in the US. And this comes from research here, right? We have the source here. So people are unable to track and trace, and that means larger outbreaks happen, right? And I'll tell you some real life incidents that we are tracking the way we handle stuff in Walmart, right? Food fraud, right? Some more numbers that comes here. Regulatory requirements are kind of asking us to modernize uh, the way we look at things, right? Um, Food waste, because if there is an outbreak of a particular foodborne illness and you'll have to discard a lot of food away, whether you know or not if that food was really contaminated, but because something got affected and someone told you about this, there is a big recall that happens and you throw that away, right? And how do you earn customer trust? By giving them visibility and transparency, and customers are actually demanding it, right? Let's look at this, right? If we see between 2017 and 2018, the number of outbreaks that are there are increasing, right? The number of food-based outbreaks are increasing, right? And this is actually something that I've derived from that particular website that actually gives us this particular data, right? I mean, there is a lot of data published for the US, but in India also we will see a lot of these things happen, right? So I'm just establishing the ground for that. So let's look at a multi-level, multi-ingredient food supply chain, right? So like I said, someone here does not know who the farmers were, right? So it's very unknown to them, right? Um, there are a bunch of farmers who are not in one particular geographic location, but could be in different locations around. Um, yeah, I'm just taking the coffee thing, and then it's traditional for them to have a cooperative or an agent in the middle, and maybe two levels of cooperatives or agents who kind of collate that. And there is a process here called as commingling, right? And the farmers, when they kind of bring in their produce, they are essentially kind of claiming the weight, the methods that they use to actually kind of cultivate the crop, and the cooperatives are kind of capturing all that information and they're mixing all those produce, which is called as commingling. Then there are different parties here. Then there are certifications that happen and processes that are applied. Chemicals are added, maybe sweeteners, etc., etc. And then finally you get to drink your coffee, right? Now, it could be the same for palm oil, it could be the same for chocolate, it could be the same for milk, etc. Right? So these are all processed products, and there is a lot of scope here when it comes to the lack of visibility, etc. Right? So what are we looking at here? We are looking at the lack of visibility, and that's what someone here, you or you as a coffee drinker or a meat eater would want to have, right? So you want visibility. So which means that you want to know the genealogy of the whole uh, produce. How did it reach you, right? You want to trace it back at to any level, right? It could be you as a consumer, it could be the retailer, it could be the intermediate supplier, it could be the manufacturer of something, right? There could be traceability that you are not having at the moment. Recalls. This is a very interesting thing. Or traceability and recall go together. There is a good story that someone tells me within Walmart that the head of food safety a couple of years back went to a particular random store in Walmart, called someone and said, "Hey, look, I picked up this box of cut mangoes. Tell me, where did this come from?" And they took 5 days to tell him where those mangoes came from, right? They did not, they had to kind of verify several documents, several uh, paper-based or some semi-digital pieces of data. They have to stitch that together and say, okay, this is how it came here, right? So is that acceptable now? If I discover that the milk that I supplied to, if I supplied 100 liters of milk or 1,000 liters of milk and that was infected by some bacteria, can I afford to wait for 5 days? No, it has to be immediate, right? If I tell my if my supplier tells me that, hey, look, the milk that I gave you had bacteria, what do I do if I take 5 days, right? So that's the whole deal here, right? And of course, wastage is another criteria that we're looking at, right? So what did we do with blockchain adaptability here? And here we did not go with a big bang, one mega network, right? And I'll tell you in a moment why. Because we had various use cases that we were dealing with. We had a use case that only talked about tuna fish. So there's a company called Bumblebee, and they wanted to deal with tuna fish, and they had to prove to their American retailers and customers that this fish was indeed an exotic fish that was caught in some place near Indonesia and packed here, etc. So they had a specific use case. There was a use case specific to palm oil because the palm oil had the growers of palm oil in Malaysia and Indonesia had to prove to the European Union that they are indeed using sustainable practices. So they had to present certification of sustainability, right? Um, we had blueberry farmers or the blueberry company in Argentina wanting to prove to their to their customers that these blueberries were indeed grown at a particular temperate uh, uh, zone, and this is how it was shipped, this is how it was plucked and washed and managed, etc. Right? So different people, different requirements. So we had to create a private network of suppliers. So, which meant that we had to first identify the multi-level and the multi-ingredient supply chain that our suppliers were participating in, or that particular customer suppliers were participating in, and bring them into a network, right? And out here, we never really went and created a mega network using Hyperledger Fabric. We used a low footprint blockchain like multi-chain for it. Multi-chain does not really come with smart contracts. Now they have something called as smart filters in the version 2. But what we did was to kind of create a digital imprint of each of the events that happen in the supply chain, right? So for example, I received something, I used that, I put that in the blockchain. I use whatever I received to create something new. So I put that into the blockchain and I exported what I created. I put that on the blockchain. So every single participant in the network just did that, right? What did I get? What did I produce? And what did I sell, right? So these were put, and that's how the genealogy chain were being created. We had to have a lot of data compliance here, right? Because we needed to ensure that our partners or the partners of the companies who are the suppliers essentially kind of can stick to some data compliance, right? And this is where um, we have to look at standardization of data called as GS1 standards. So the GLN codes for the locations where certain activities happen, the GTIN numbers for each of the products that were created had to be used along with the GS1 standards and various other standards in terms of how do they supply the purchase orders, how do they do the store scans, etc., right? Which meant that we then had to provide a track and trace service. So when we provided the track and trace service, how did we do this? Was to use a combination of data that was, so we created a multi-tenant system where each of the participant in the network has a tenant and has a blockchain node. Some parts of the data which can still be exposed to the blockchain, like the generic product information, the events that were happening on each of those products, like the receive, the create, the sell, the commissioning, the decommissioning, etc., were put on the blockchain. But certain pieces of information which were like the identity of the particular supplier, etc., were put on the tenant database, which were not exposed outside. And with that, we were able to actually create a genealogy map and showcase that to our customers, right? And then we have a way in which we could do recall management with the combination of data that is sitting in the ERP systems, which is sitting in the tenant database and the blockchain. We were able to create a very effective recall management tool. And it is important for me to say that from 5 days or 6 days that it used to happen, we could reduce the recall management uh, to a few seconds, right? So we could clearly identify the moment a particular entity upstream in the supply chain issued a recall. So upstream is this, right? So someone here figures out that it has to be recalled. It's not that they're just sending it to one importer, right? It could be 10 different importers, 100 different coffee shops. So you need to inform all of them, and they are on the blockchain. So what we could essentially do is that send out alerts to them saying that this particular batch that you procured from us via this purchase order on this particular day, which went into these four orders, fulfillment orders that we gave you, have been contaminated, right? And that's how we were able to kind of send that alert A via emails, B via SMS, right? And send it directly to them. And many of them wanted an ERP integration for that, so that they could actually send it back into their production systems, etc. So you could actually do that. And that's exactly what we did in terms of integration with IoT and ERP that we did. One of the use cases demanded that, for example, to kind of reward the farmers for selling us organic products or sustainable products, if they could prove, then we could actually reward them better. And the reward mechanism was done by the concept called tokenization. So if they brought us 100 kilos of palm oil fruit, and if they were able to prove via a certification which was verifiable on the blockchain, because the certification authority was supplying information into the blockchain, right? We were able to tokenize that particular set of palm oil produced and actually give them reward points, so that which meant that they could actually get better access to fertilizers, etc. And this was an ongoing activity that was being done by what I was participating in my former organization, SAP, right? So like I said, create a private networks for suppliers and partners, right? Created a digital twin of all the events, what was produced, what was delivered, what was recalled, what was commissioned, or commissioned means actually sent into the stores, etc., right? We could also then control that those details by adding additional information like properties. So if there were properties like which said that, okay, this is perishable by this particular date, so some of the general properties of each of those things, ingredients, etc., we could put them there. the certification of those things, whether it used fair trade, whether it used sustainable practices, etc., that could be put and that could be validated with the certification authorities. We were able to provide evidential provability by using IoT and external systems. Those systems would send in real-time data and we could actually prove that. And then we were able to do that on cloud with multi-tenant systems. Coming to the companies that are working on this, happy to say that Walmart as a company is collaborating with IBM, and we have a product called IBM Food Trust, which is again a product that has been in existence for the past couple of years, and Walmart works very closely with that, and I'm part of that team taking care of the supply chain and provenance tracking with the IBM blockchain power that powers the food trust here. One of the big activities that is happening. Formerly, I was associated with a product in SAP called SAP Material Traceability, where I mentioned to you some of the use cases that we did uh, with the tracking of blueberries or the tuna fish uh, or the palm oil track and trace, etc. Right? Um, there are several startups and several big companies that are doing it. Recently, I had an opportunity to talk to two startups in Bangalore who are doing something pretty interesting, TraceX Tech and AgroBlock. They are doing coffee traceability. There is a flavor of coffee called Slay, Slay, and you can actually do the track and trace for that. And that is being provided by one of these companies. And there's also track and trace for some of the produce that goes to MTR. So they are doing that. And uh, our favorite Byadgi chilies, for those of you who use that, you'll know the flavor that it gives. So Byadgi chili track and trace is being done by one of these startups. So just case in point being that I talked to you about the agri-tech kind of getting more digitized. So this is a very good example of these companies doing it. Some of the technologies people are using Hyperledger Fabric. Some of these startups like IBM, sorry, companies like IBM, TraceX, and AgroBlock use Hyperledger Fabric. SAP uses multi-chain, and SAP also uses for one of its other track and trace products, Quorum, where tokenization is required, right? So a little bit of thoughts on what we do at Walmart. So we are a Hyperledger partner, and we've been working very closely with the Hyperledger community and the IBM Food Trust to kind of bring transparency to the food supply chain and do data compliance and ensure that the recall management is really taken care of. And we've also worked with the GS1 standards to ensure that it's standardized and data exchange can be more seamless, right? So we've been doing that. We already have several of our food supply chain partners already on the network, and we are continuing to work closely with our partners, suppliers, and IBM to get that done, right? Um, but is blockchain just enough to do all of these things and solve the problems in supply chain? I would say no, because a combination of other technologies is very relevant here. Um, OCRs have been there for quite some time, but computer vision and enhanced OCRs can actually provide a lot of ways in which digitization or creating the digital twin of some of these paper-based documents can be done, or to identify certain patterns here. That is very important for us to have. IoT is a big requirement to have provability, right? There is a blockchain session that I attended some weeks ago on ethical sourcing of cobalt for one of the car manufacturers. And the way they're doing it is they're using a combination of GPS and IoT and computer vision to actually give evidential provability of where the cobalt was sourced, how was it processed, till it gets to the car manufacturer. So this was a startup in England that is doing it. So it's very relevant here. There's a lot of data out there in the market. So how do we actually use big data uh, that comes not just with ERP and transactional systems, but with IoT, etc., to see how do we use that in conjunction with blockchain to make the use cases far more stabler and cost benefit for the customers there. There is a lot of governance. Blockchain requires governance. So it means that, okay, how do I really create a network? Who runs the network? Because everything is peer to peer. There is always a question as to who creates the network, who runs the network, what is there in it for me if I participate in the network, etc. Right? So these are some of the questions that need to be answered, and governance comes um, player in this area, right? And then we have interoperability because there are too many networks that are being created. So we need interoperability not just with blockchain networks, but also with different products that are there. There are different networks that are operating and regulations, right? We saw about some of the FDA regulations, etc., right? Um, So is blockchain a way in which we can get things done? Yes, but I would also say that directly using a lot of these blockchain technologies like Hyperledger Fabric or multi-chain or Quorum or Ethereum, the time that you will spend on getting things done will be a little slow. So you have to go with, or I would recommend the usage of blockchain as a service platforms provided by some of these companies here, IBM, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, etc. They also provide managed services where they take it a notch above and they kind of manage your blockchain services for you, upgradations, etc. that they take care of. Because the advantages that it gives is that it's very readily available. You can spin up a network very quickly. They give you a lot of support in terms of availability, technical support, etc. They give you a lot of business templates through which you can quickly write smart contracts so that you can accelerate your go-to market, right? So before we conclude, some takeaways. Blockchain is a network game. It cannot be played alone. You need several parties to be part of it and work together to realize value. It will take time, but that's how it has to be played. It's like playing a test match and bringing people together, creating partnerships, and winning session by session. Right? That's how test matches in cricket are played. You have to choose your use cases wisely. I mean, don't do things for the sake of doing things. I mean, if there are only two parties, if you can live with databases, live with it because databases are still quicker, faster, and more efficient sometimes with compared to blockchains. Integration is very critical. Blockchain, since we said is a network game, it cannot exist in vacuum. It needs to integrate with several different entities like IoT, ERP systems, mobile systems, etc. Interoperability is a very big charter for blockchain at this moment. People are still trying with trade finance. Um, People are really trying to ensure that interoperability can be established across networks which use the same blockchain technology or across networks that use different blockchain technologies, etc. here. Uh, what is this? Someone is... Okay, approve it. Let me see what Okay, there is a thing where we need business models which can really evolve and say that what is the real value that one can get in participating in a blockchain network. We have a lot of regulations that blockchain still has to follow up and be part of, which means GDPR and various other regulations that different bodies bring in, so have to be uh, kind of adhered to. And blockchain is still an evolving technology, right? Sometimes it can be slow. The performance might still be slow. We can talk about whether it is secure, the ease of use, etc. can be questionable. Whether we should use cryptocurrency, whether I should use an ICO, etc. I mean, these are things that are evolving at the moment. So I would say it still takes time to get things done on blockchain. We need to be patient here. How do I go to the next slide? No. Okay, I'm at the end of my session. These are my details. If you want to be in touch with me, this is how you can get in touch with me. So thank you very much for listening in patiently, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Okay. Yeah, the participants can unmute and discuss if you want. You can interact with sir.
Raghavendra, good afternoon. This is Murugan this side.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for your presentation. I have one question. How do you architect this blockchain when the multiple people are there? Who takes what role, like particularly consensus and this kind of a thing? How normally, say, in our software development life cycle, we have the user requirement and all those things. Is there is any specific model for this blockchain to architect and then go for execution and implementation?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I said that this was a network game, right? So it means that everyone who has to potentially be part of the network has to collaborate with each other. So one is the difficulty that we will see is in terms of a smart contract, because what do we write into the smart contract? And more important than that is what goes into the blockchain, right? So that has to be clearly determined in terms of the business piece of information that goes. The third piece of information that we need to be clearly aware of when we start is how are we going to let people come in to the network and go out of the network or interact with the blockchain. So which means that how strong is your API that you will provide as a gateway in for data and participants to come into your blockchain and share the data, right? So these are some of the things that we need to look at, and that's where at least the approach that we have followed is to co-innovate with customers. So we start going to them with an idea and saying that, hey, look, this is what we have, and this is where we see value, and then we kind of co-innovate with them. We have actually made a lot of changes to our original idea and gone different directions. So we have pivoted our ideas several times based on the customer requirements and the partners' requirements, and then that's how we have been able to architect this. And the biggest decision that you will make is whether you'll need a smart contract based system or not, right? So at one point in time, we were kind of over engineering by trying to put a smart contract based system, but we never really got around to writing a smart contract. So we went back to using a multi-chain kind of a system. So these are some of the ways in which we can architect a blockchain system, but the requirements have to be pretty clear, right, to start with, and there has to be more than one party. So it's just not a technology company that goes and creates a product and then starts selling it. It has to have the participation and the co-innovation done.
Thank you, Raghavendra. Who owns the infrastructure actually? Is it everyone will own some piece or?
Very good question, because I talked about the business model here, right? So when we say who owns the infrastructure, and I gave you an example earlier where one of our partners wanted to bring their own node, right? So they had a Hyperledger Fabric node, which they were using for something else. They wanted to just bring in that node and participate in it via a different channel. So it could be two models, Murugan, that can be used. One is you use a technology company, right? I talked about the usage of Microsoft or Google or IBM or any of these, SAP or any of these providers, infrastructure, and you spin up your nodes and your cloud systems on that. But and then you can do that, or you can bring in your own infrastructure. You can connect your own node from your own server or service into into the blockchain, right? So it could be a hybrid model, and that's something which has to be discussed when we look at integration, interoperability, and the business model that we create.
Thank you, Raghavendra.
Thank you.
Any more questions, please? Sir, I guess there are no more questions.
Okay.
So I thank Mr. Raghavendra Deshmukh for shedding light on how the existing system needs to be augmented and blockchain can be effectively applied for various use cases. Thank you so much for just sparing time with us and sharing your valuable knowledge, sir. Thank you for accepting our invitation. We look forward to having more associations with you like this.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's really a good thing to see that the academia is participating in such topics. And I look forward to more engagement with your prestigious institute, BIT. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day ahead. Bye.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So participants, as Mr. Raghavendra Deshmukh mentioned that blockchain needs to be integrated with other technologies as well. In continuation, we have one more talk in the afternoon today at 2:30 by Dr. Nidal Nasser, who will be joining us from Saudi Arabia. He'll be shedding light on the various issues of blockchain and IoT, the combination, the issues, challenges, and everything. So we'll all join for the next session at 2:30. Thank you all. Thank you.